but that is what woke policing is doing. Now, Lidia Thorpe went on an anti-Israel rant this week, asking the government to encourage Israel to end its, quote, illegal occupation of Palestinian land. She also likened the experience of Indigenous people to those suffering at the hands of this war.
We know this grief, sorrow and anger. It binds First People and Palestinians together. We share a history and reality of attempted genocide.
Really? It comes, yes. But this comes at the same moment that the Labor government has hardened its pro-Palestine stance. Joining us now to discuss this is David Adler, the president of the Australian Jewish Association. David, great to see you as always. Let's just kick off with the Lidia question. Genocide? Seriously, the equivalence of Palestinians, Indigenous, what's all this mean?
Rowan, if there was a competition for the most disgraceful, inaccurate statement made on the floor of an Australian parliament, I think Lidia would be in the running for a gold medal performance for that one. Just about every statement she made, the opposite is true. This would be the only occasion in human history where a genocide has been alleged alongside a dramatic increase in the said population. She also has her history completely inverted. And maybe she would benefit from a school-level education. I don't know, because it's clearly lacking. The Jewish people are indigenous to the land of Israel. I would recommend that Lidia should go to Israel. If she wants to, she can go to Hebron and stand alongside the tombs of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, the Jewish ancestors. She can stand alongside the tomb of King David, who was one of the kings of the former kingdom of Israel, and she can visit ancient burial grounds and burial caves of where Jews are buried over thousands of years. And if she wants to do something other than expose her hypocrisy, she could accept the proposition which she uses locally that the Jewish people never ceded sovereignty. She should be an advocate for Jewish sovereignty in the land of Israel.
Absolutely. And she could also maybe read the Bible. She might find some of that information there as well about ancient
it's just nuts.
History. But how dangerous is this? Because as we said, okay, Lidia Thorpe is Lidia Thorpe. But this week we've had around the world, including places like Egypt, praise for Penny Wong and the Labor Party's statements this week of a similar nature. Tell us about it.
I can see on the screen at the moment a poster, and I think this is the first time that a serving Australian foreign minister has been put on a Hamas poster.
Wow.
This is a poster from Quds News Network, which is the propaganda arm of Hamas, because Australian government, the Labor government, has adopted the same terminology as the enemies of Israel. So they're being praised. Now, maybe if you're being supported by Hamas, you've gone a step too far.
I think so. I think that's a fair call.
Well, not in the eyes of Labor's national conference, because this is who they're pandering to here, aren't they?
Well, Rita, what this illustrates and what you're raising is that as far as the Middle East is concerned, Australia's foreign policy is now not formed on truth. It's not formed on what is in the national interest, which would be to support the only ally we can rely on in the Middle East. It is supported by grubby factional deals in the Labor Party. That is how this foreign policy was born.
And David, the thing that, you mentioned, allies and so on, the thing that really disturbs me about this is that you've got the far left, the Labour Party, essentially making foreign policy. So yes, with Israel, this is terrible, but, are you concerned that this is also sending a terrible message to the United States at a time when there's concern around AUKUS, and also to other countries around the world about whether or not we actually do stick by our friends? And I see this in the context also of Anthony Albanese's pandering, I think, to China at the moment.
Well, I know you're an expert on US politics, James, and Australia now has a much more radical position than the Biden administration. So there's a benchmark. In terms of bad messages, this is pandering also to the jihadist terrorists. It's saying to them that your terrorism is not a concern to Australian foreign policy. We will move in your direction without you disavowing pay for slay, without you disavowing the murder of Israeli civilians. This initiative is anti-peace.
100%. You mentioned the pay for slay. Let's not forget that it was this program, The Spectator magazine, and predominantly yourself and politicians like Pauline Hanson who got Australian taxpayers' dollars, 10 million worth, not to go to UNRWA every year. Penny Wong reversed that, giving $10 million extra a year back, which we know, certainly the evidence is there, that goes towards encouraging children to hate Jews, to practice knife slaying.
Rowan, there have been half a dozen hostile to Israel steps that this government has taken. The removal of the limited recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital, the restoration of UNRWA funding, as you say. Australia's voting pattern has changed in the United Nations, and it's been noticed by a number of organisations. We've failed to stand with other countries that have called out the vilification and isolation of Israel at the UN Human Rights Commission. So there's a whole series, and now this latest one adopting the terminology of the enemies. I mean, it's...
And they're saying, and Andrew Bolt made a great point this week, that by withdrawing recognition of West Jerusalem and also declaring East Jerusalem occupied territory, they're basically, Penny Wong and Anthony Albanese are basically saying, we don't want any Jews in Jerusalem, thank you, or we're quite happy if there aren't any. That's the end result of all these sorts of moves. That's what they're talking about. They're talking about quite happily, okay, we'll get the Jews out of East Jerusalem. No, we don't really care. What happens in West Jerusalem, maybe they'll whatever. That's the end point. It's an ugly end point, and they don't seem to realise the fire they are playing with.
Well, the only good thing is that Australia has very limited influence in this sphere. It's not like the United States. And
yes, but this has been noticed all around the world. The Australian Jewish News in Britain, someone sent me a copy. This is noticed. Australia is an important country.
As is the fact that we've abstained from certain votes at the UN that in the past.
It's a dreadful trend, and we certainly object to it violently. And I suspect the average Australian, even though they might not be full bottle on Middle East politics, if they see that Australia's foreign minister is being praised by Hamas, that would set off some
alarm bells.
And yet we've got, I want to ask the question, the local Jewish community in this country, are they still overwhelmingly or majority leaning towards the left parties, Labor and the Greens, or has there been a change? Because we're seeing in the US quite a sizable majority lean towards the Democrats, even though we've had some very virulently anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, you could even argue, forces within the Democrats recently. So is there a shift happening in the mindset from what you can see of the local Jewish community?
Look, it's hard to know, Rita. There appears to be a disconnection between the elites in some of the organisations versus the average person in the community. And one of the reasons we can say that is that because our organisation, which was launched only in 2017, has become by far the largest on social media in Australia, so that when individuals are on their computers or their phones and they're deciding where do they want to get their information, who do they connect with, they're choosing a centre-right conservative organisation that is principled in its support for Israel.
And David, just to flip Rita's question around a bit, are you concerned that this represents a slow, I guess you could call Corbynisation of the Labour Party, that they've started to move in the direction of the UK Labour Party when it was under Jeremy Corbyn? And what have you seen out of the coalition, the opposition on this? Have they indicated that in government they would reverse this explicitly?
Well, Peter Dutton made a fairly strong statement in Parliament condemning the latest moves from the Labor Party, and we support that statement. They haven't yet taken that extra step, and we think they should, to make it clear that when a coalition is returned to government, they will restore Australia's foreign policy to where it was before this Labor government, at least.
Well, there you go, Peter Dutton. Another reason to watch Outsiders every Sunday morning, as I know you do, because they're a great tip from David Adler. There's another policy you can be taking to the next election. We're full of them. We got some would say other things. We've got lots more coming up on the show. Sarah Henderson, first time on Outsiders.